The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Things were kind of heating up with the cold case posse with Sheriff Arpaio. It had become clear. Mike Zullo had made comments to Carl Gallups saying that their investigation had expanded, and they had into other areas besides just the birth certificate, and that they had basically universe-shattering evidence that was going to be coming forward. And as we know, the regime spies on everybody, and they had some knowledge of what was coming down the pike. And it was within that setting that this supposed crash, happened. It was on December 11th of 2013. And immediately all the stories that were told didn't line up. There were things that just didn't make sense, and it was very suspicious. And immediately some people were questioning what was really going on with that crash. And that's when I began investigating, and I was determined that I would go wherever the evidence took me, and it's definitely taken me some very interesting places.
I can imagine it has. One question that a few people in our interactive chat room have mentioned is the president's Social Security number. They see this, obviously his Social Security number is a number that stems from Connecticut, a place where he never resided in, and if you look at the way they issue the Social Security numbers, this would be an impossibility. With I guess many people look at the birth certificate issue, the media has marginalized the whole movement, calling people birthers or racist, however they can, whatever labels they can put on these people who are looking for the truth they've done. Do you see the birth certificate as a bigger issue, or the Social Security number, and with the Social Security findings or the details about the Social Security number being left out of a lot of the birther investigations, which one would have more of a chance, do you think, of getting attention in today's world, in the here and now after 6 years of his presidency?
Well, I think they all kind of tie in together, because the whole scheme. I mean, you can look at any record, any official record that this guy was supposed to have, and there is a problem with it. Any one of those you could say, it was a fluke or something. But to have every record associated with this guy have anomalies in it, that tells you something, and it tells you the number of people involved in covering for this guy, and leads to the question of why are all these different people, different agencies covering for this guy. So I don't see it as an either or, I see it as a both and, that it's all important, because it all points to conspiracy on the part of various people to hide the past of this man and to hide the crimes that have been committed, to make it seem like his documentation is okay. And it's far bigger than, and the things that I've found in the last 2 months have absolutely widened the net of people who have been brought into covering for this guy, and the lengths to which they will go.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was something, Joe, that I in this case, I think we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit. However, it's a good question, and ladies and gentlemen, it's just hang on, because what you're about to hear, the findings from Butter the Zillion, and I'm working right now, folks, because of the I'm putting a link up on our website right now, and in fact, it'll be up there through tomorrow to her website. You can see a lot of the background on this, but really, I think just to attack this, because it's such a large and convoluted and complex subject, I've got to say that I really believe what you found, what you've uncovered through your research, the Freedom of Information Act, through your requests, discussions, I mean, tireless going after the federal government for information, is the fact that the United States of America has we have been we've been taken over, and I think what we've seen here, and I think you've probably proven it sufficiently, is the fact that this was in part a military operation, perhaps, or could have been a military operation involved. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that correctly. With Loretta Fuddy.
You are, and actually there could have been 3 branches of the military that were involved in this. Actually, the records that I've requested and the anomalies that have been found implicate a lot of people. And one of the things that first caught my attention as I was researching this was when I looked at the interviews that were done, and what the Coast Guard rescue swimmers were saying, and they were saying that they found Loretta Fuddy and she wasn't responsive, and so the protocols said that they had to go on to the next person. And I really, really wondered about that, so I looked up the protocols, and the protocols that they have say exactly the opposite, that there are the only instances in which they are allowed to pass someone over is if, well, let's see if I can remember it. If their head, if they've been beheaded, if they're charred to a crisp, if their lungs, heart, or liver are separated from the rest of their body, or if they have clear signs that they've been dead for at least 2 hours, like pooling of the blood in the lower part of the body and stuff like that.
So Ichabod Crane, or disemboweled, or I mean it's pretty obvious. Yes, I'm sorry to make a joke about that, but the triage requirements or the triage protocol it's very, very stringent. You don't leave somebody you don't pass by someone for treatment unless they're obviously not with us in the larger sense any longer. Go ahead. Right. I didn't mean to interrupt.
And so when I saw that, I realized that this person had not told the truth, that this was a Coast Guard person who had not told the truth, and it shook me. I shouldn't have been so surprised, but I was, because I didn't want that to be the case. I had been thinking, how could they poison her so that the Coast Guard rescue swimmer wouldn't know the difference and all that? And then I thought, well, the rescue swimmer is telling us stuff that's not necessarily true here. So the Coast Guard swimmer is implicated. And as I did more research and as I made the Freedom of Information Act and UPA, which is Hawaii's FOIA law, when I made those requests and started getting back some of the records that I requested, I started seeing a lot of anomalies that were going on in every area. How when the crash happened, how it was discovered, how they got everybody there, how many people were there, who found Fuddy, who picked Fuddy out of the water, what they did with her body, where they took her, the whole thing, everything about it. There were discrepancies in the official records as well as in the media reports that were out, and I haven't made a lot of the documentation regarding that public to this point, because I still had outstanding that I was hoping to be able to get the records from the FAA, and I didn't want them to know what they needed to change if they were going to try to change records. And that kind of brings us to where we're at right now, because this audience was very generous and helped bring forward the funds that were necessary to be able to pay for the requests that I made. And initially I was told that the FAA FOIA request that I was going to have, that it was going to be $2,000 because of the number of audio tapes that I was supposed to receive. I made the FOIA request with the money that this group, that this audience raised for that. And they sent me the records, and the records that they sent were a partial denial of access. They said that they needed to redact the identity of military aircraft that were in some of these records. And I'll go into that a little bit later, I guess, but they were going to redact that. So it was a partial denial of access. It was a partial disclosure. They gave me some records. They gave me some paper records, documents that they had, as well as they gave me some of the audio tapes of the air traffic controllers and the handling the radio frequencies and that kind of thing, the air traffic control stuff. And this is probably the most important and most shocking part. It was also a response saying that they had no records because they said that some of the records that I requested were not available because they had been destroyed. And the records.
Wow. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
You caught that, right? Okay, good. Thank you. All right. All righty. Let me regain my composure here. There we go. All right. Live radio. You gotta love it. Where was I going with this question? I just got red buttoned on my own show. How do you like that? All right. You didn't even hear that, so okay. Hopefully that worked. All right. Well, I was going to ask you a question that had to do with.
Well, I'll jump in. And the
Thank
question
you.
I have is with the redaction that they said whatever it was called, the denial of records. They said that they were going to need to redact information on military planes that were in the area at the time of the crash.
They didn't specifically say in that document that the military aircraft was in the region of the crash, but what they did is they had at the beginning of the day they had instructions kind of how the day was going to go there at the Honolulu Control Facility. And one of the things that they had been told ahead of time at the beginning of the day, they had been told that there was going to be a military operation between 3 and 4 p.m. And they had to redact, the FAA said that they had to redact the identity of the military aircraft that were going to be involved. They reserved a range of frequencies that is normally used by the Air Force or the Army. And in the tapes that they did give me, as you listen to the tapes, this was on the daily log, the stuff where they were told that there was going to be this operation ahead of time. Oh, rats! My mind just went blank. Anyway, there was the tape where the air traffic controller was talking at 3:27, which is when the crash happened. The air traffic controller said that the area had gone cold, and from the talking that I've done with people who are very familiar with the FAA and been involved with the FAA and all that, they've said usually that terminology is used for when you've got either a government or a military entity that was there and is no longer there. Also on the tape, special activities. That's where I was going from. This sheet where they told them ahead of time that there was going to be a military operation, they listed it under special activities. These were special activities that the HCF needed to be aware of. Well, the air traffic controllers were talking about, special activities is this guy, and they're pointing to somebody on their radar, apparently, and it was in that precise area, and it was at that precise time. It was right after the crash had happened, like 3:27, 3:28, is the time frame in which they were saying that this was this special activity that they had been told was going to happen. So it was a military activity. It was in the area. It was immediately after the crash, and it was apparently short-lived because it seems like they were saying that the military aircraft had left the area very quickly after that. And those who have seen the Puentes, the video that was taken of the crash that Ferdinand Puentes came out with, know that I have pointed out what I believe are extra people and extra equipment in the water. And one of the first objections that came out when people asked people who had been, SEALs and such, was there's no way that you could have somebody waiting in the water and know precisely where that plane was going to land and get them there right there like that. There's no way that could happen, and so that was a snag for people to believe what they were seeing with their eyes. Well, I believe that what we've got from what the FAA gave me, that both the tapes and this advance warning that the HCF got that there was going to be a military operation between 3 and 4, and it showing up at that precise time, I believe that the military operation was to drop off those extra people and the equipment. And if Loretta Fuddy was truly on that flight, I suspect that they may have picked her up at that time.
The documents show, the documents that were supplied to you via the Freedom of Information Act show at 16:19 local time, which is would be 4:19. I'm sorry, local time, 16:19 special operations, and then the data is redacted pursuant to FOIA Exemption 3, which is essentially a national security operation exemption, 5 U.S.C. Section 552B3 and 49 U.S.C. Section 401.19B as well. Interesting. So what we've got a special military operations ongoing in the very location out of all the entire planet. It just so happens that there's a special operations going on in the exact vicinity, in the exact sector, the exact area, as the plane carrying Loretta Fuddy goes down. Yeah, that's coincidence. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of other coincidences as well. When you look at what was in the audio tapes that I did receive, the timing in all of this, the timing has just been really, really messed up. And are you prepared for me to go here with this yet?
Oh, I'm prepared. We're prepared. We have our seatbelts buckled and tray tables up and seats upright and fastened. Let's rock and roll with this.
Okay. The tapes that we have, and the records that I had received from the FAA earlier, I had received records from their compliance investigation that they had done, and in that report, it was identified that the crash occurred at 3:27, and presumably that was on the basis of the radar that they discovered that. So 3:27, you have to remember that 3:27 is the time that this crash happened. Well, there was a report, the first report that they had of the, well, maybe I should first read a couple of things from the Coast Guard report to kind of set up what I was looking at one of the reasons that I wanted to look at the FAA tapes in the first place. reading directly from the U.S. From the Coast Guard case report. It says here at 3:27 Hawaii Standard Time, it says initial notification, received a call from HCF, the Honolulu Control Facility, reported receiving multiple 121.5 megahertz reports from aircraft operating from north of Molokai, Maui, and Oahu. Okay, so that's saying that they had multiple reports on the Common Traffic Advisory Channel, the 121.5 megahertz. But later on, and let's see if I can find this here. Okay. They had asked. The Coast Guard had asked the FAA. It said, was there a 121.5 or 406 EPIRB reported by aircraft on scene? And the response was, FAA reports inquiries to aircraft passing north and south of Molokai yielded no reports of 121.5 distress signals being received. No 406 SARSAT alert was received for this aircraft. Okay, so in the Coast Guard report, you've got them saying at 3:27, the Honolulu Control Facility contacted the Coast Guard saying they had received a bunch of reports on the Common Traffic Advisory. They had received all these reports of an ELT that was sounding. At 3:27, they received all those reports. But you've also got in the Coast Guard report saying that when they made inquiries to people who were in that area, there were no reports of an ELT. So immediately there, you've got that contradiction. So I wanted to look at the FAA tapes to find out what really happened. Well, what really happened, according to the FAA tapes that I was able to receive, there was a report of an ELT. The only trouble is that it was received 4 minutes before the crash happened. And the question arose, could it be that that the pilot was testing the ELT? And so this aircraft just heard him testing the ELT, and that really doesn't make sense with what happened either, because what happened, they had this aircraft, Hawaiian 2 Heavy, that said we're getting an ELT really strong in the area of Kalapapa. So then they're in the background of this air traffic controller tape, somebody's saying 2 is too high for ELT. So they're kind of questioning, well, how would this, we don't think they could have heard this. So they were talking to, and ELTs are kind of temperamental also, where they can go off at strange times, and you just never know exactly what's going on. So they always want to check and see if there are other people who are also hearing an ELT before they take it very seriously. So they asked another aircraft, are you hearing an ELT? And he said, well, I heard it go, I heard a flicker and then it was gone. And then they asked another aircraft, and they said, yeah, they were hearing it loud and clear. No, wait a minute. That was later on. They ended up asking Hawaiian 2 Heavy again, are you still hearing the ELT? So it was a minute after they first heard it and reported it. So a minute later, the air traffic controller asked, are you still hearing that ELT? And they said, yeah, loud and clear, we're still hearing it. And then around that same time, in the background on the tape, you can hear them making reference to the call sign for Lang's plane, the Alpha 2 Sierra. And so Lang called in right then at that time, supposedly just checking in, letting them know that he's flying over Molokai to go to Maui. But he called in right then at that time. And then within the next minute, they were saying that the Molokai Tower was saying that they had a couple of guys who were hearing a faint ELT signal. So you've got this, and all of this is happening before the crash even happened. You've got at 3:23, you've got the aircraft saying that they're hearing an ELT, a strong signal. A minute later, and then the air traffic controller asked somebody else, and they said, well, we heard it just for a flash, and then it was gone. And then a minute after the original report, they asked that aircraft, "Are you still hearing it?" And they said, "Yeah, loud and clear." And then Lang calls in, and within that next minute, he and supposedly another person are saying, "Oh, we're getting a faint ELT signal." So you've got all these people saying that they're getting these ELT signals, but it was before the crash happened. So you've got at least 3 minutes worth of people supposedly hearing this ELT before the crash happened. That wouldn't be somebody testing their ELT. If you were going to test an ELT, you'd give it a flip, you'd hear that it works, and then you'd move on to the next thing that you needed to check. So it doesn't really fit the story that that Kawasaki was just checking to see if his ELT worked. You've got about 3 different people who are saying that there was an ELT that could not have just been him checking his ELT, and it could not have been because of the crash.
So just to be clear, folks, ELT is the emergency locator transmitter. I believe it's the acronym for, abbreviation for, on the plane. So, your plane goes down in the water, the beep, beep, beep thing, that's what an ELT signal is. So what you're saying, it was going off really 4 minutes before the crash, steadily, heard by others. Okay.
That there's a steady stream of time where people were saying that this ELT was sounding and there wasn't a crash. And someone who is very, very intimately aware of how ELTs work and what's reasonable to expect and all that has very emphatically believes that the water landing that happened would not have been enough to activate the ELT. And the reports that they had of this ELT were from before the landing even happened.
Yeah, I don't want to minimize the accident, but or the water landing, but certainly I think we've all hit potholes a lot harder than the way it appears that plane did land on the water. So we've got first of all, just to recap, we've got Loretta Fuddy, total of 9 people on the aircraft, including a pilot, leaving one island to go back to another, and she's on board. This is a pre-scheduled flight. Loretta Fuddy is, of course, the gatekeeper, or was the gatekeeper for the secrets behind the certificate of live birth. You've got a military operation that we now know, based on your research, your intrepid research, that was going on for a specific period of time, the very time of this hard water landing, at the very location where this plane went into the water. You've got this errant ELT signal 4 minutes before the plane ever hit the water.
Mm-hmm. 4 minutes, and 3 minutes, and 2 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So just kind of recapping everything. Okay. And if this isn't enough, you've got one thing that when I self-immolated there out of necessity with the red button, the big thing, and one of the big things is when you requested, and I don't mean to go here if you're not ready to go here, but just to reinforce this, when you requested records from the FAA, certain records, you want to, they were destroyed.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Yes, I would like to talk about that. And in talking about that, I think it would be good to go over some of the stuff with the way that the FAA has to work. Whenever there's an accident or an incident or whatever that involves a commercial aircraft and or involves a death or serious injury, the FAA is required to create an accident package, is what they call it. And they also create an accident file that includes even more than the accident package does. And what they have to do is the last facility that was in contact with the aircraft is usually the facility that is in charge of collecting all of these records. And immediately when that happens, they send out notifications to all of the FAA facilities or FAA contracted facilities that that have a potential role in what was going on, who might have potential information. And I'm just going to read here from the FAA document, which says,
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.